I've got one more thing to go on the cone issue, but before I get there, give us your take on the pineal gland cone structure and so forth. How does that interact with our biology, with our consciousness, and
It's key. It's absolutely the seat of the soul for sure. When I did the capacitive accelerometrics with Ben Toff, who wrote the book on the biomechanics of Kundalini, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, which is now our documentaries professional at goldenmean.info/Kundalini, the best biophysics of Kundalini instruction on the planet for sure. But what happened is the measurable phonon of the spine liquid pump would then phase lock with the ventral cavities in the brain. You get horny, and the ventral cavities actually crystallize. And that focuses the phonon coherence at the pineal. Highly piezo, highly implosive, highly microwave active, highly negative ion wind generating. And the tip of my head got very pointed, and you could feel the negative ion wind after 30 years of Kundalini. I kind of know what that is. But so that the pineal is actually igniting, literally igniting, exactly in the same way when we trigger the right frequencies into the noble gases of our Therify and now PhiRay.com. And so that ignition produces that radiance. And that's why in the first book on Kundalini called Great Masks of God it's a book on physics, that in Iceland they call the Kundalini the Great Masks of God, because you could see these Kundalini experiencers at great distance because of that radiance. So the physics of pineal is very important here. And it is literally, starts with phonon implosion, but it has capacitive and optical components, of course. So the wiring of the seat of the soul, absolutely. And if you use it well, this is the highest form of psychokinesis. And also there is danger because, first of all, Kundalini can kill you if you overdo it, for sure. And there's a tremendous tendency for decadence, falling into the worst perversities possible when you have this intense. It's because it's highly erotic, for one thing. So, Kundalini is a two-edged sword, for sure. But it is a rapid ladder to evolution if you can handle it.
so just on the since we're sort of touching, dealing with the cone shaped tools and the cones and so forth, what really blew my mind is at the time when I was making all these discoveries and Caesar beams, and then I met two scientists in Germany that were working with what we're then calling hypersound. I'm sure that they possibly changed the terminology since then. I don't know, but hypersound basically when they speed up sounds to move beyond the speed of light, and literally use it as a tool that is just incredibly powerful. And directional tools like Caesar beam kind of technology through cone shaped tools, through cones.
Yes.
And so they from these two guys that were working in very secret projects, but yeah, they couldn't really tell me more except what they were experiencing. They were learning. This is all experiments. They were learning, and they were destroying things and causing chaos. And like the one guy told me that the one guy told me that they had problems trying to neutralize it and stop it from bouncing around and causing damage. And what they found by accident is that packing tape, like was a good thing that broke its intensity, like a few layers of packing tape. No, I'm just sharing some one.
Probably hit. So that if you have low dielectric, then it'll inhibit. The physics here is the phonon sound, for example, the phonons called bliss binaural beat from our flameinmind.com app, world's most powerful bliss-inducing binaural sound, doesn't even require the expensive brainwave part. Now that heterodyne, which is perfect implosive phase conjugate golden ratio, imploding the brainwaves, generates an ultrasonic component, yes, but the primary thing is that implosion generates a coherent longitudinal propagation. Sound starts with the longitudinal, but when it implodes magnetically, you have longitudinal electromagnetics. And that component will go, a longitudinal EMF, most physicists don't know, will go through about anything, including a Faraday cage. But it will only then bounce at the next nearby longitudinal node, where only there will it then exchange inertia with the transverse again, which means you can do heat containment at a distance, the holy grail of fusion research, and the only physics of all action at a distance, wrongly called entanglement. The correct word is phase conjugate embedding. So the longitudinal component actually is the superluminal component, and the multiple of the number of harmonics will be multiple golden ratio multiples times the speed of light. And that's been measured by Raymond Chow. The most measurements faster than light are all 1.5, 1.7 the speed of light, which is golden ratio times the speed of light, which is smoking gun that I'm right. So the number of harmonics, golden ratio times the speed of light, is literally the number of dimensions you live in. And so that ability to propagate superluminally becomes the physics of time travel and action at a distance and instantaneous global communication. And even Hartmut Mueller did that. That was all based on longitudinal coherence.
So what really got me excited was this. This is just a little curiosity. I'm sure that the viewers will find interesting. When you bring a magnet close to a ferrofluid, they just make these incredible cones, right? This is just like really like you can't just. This is so obvious now. What's going on in nature, right? It's all around us. The connection, that's screaming. It's screaming at us what this is, right? But what really got me excited was this guy here in 2017, Henrik Halter, I think his name is. He won the Saab Award for, at the time, discovering the most powerful antenna. Okay, he's holding it in his hand there. And this is what it looks like. It's just a bunch of cones on a metal plate.
Those are microwave active for sure.
Yeah, and they call it the phase ray antenna. That's what they called it.
Well, and to conjugate microwave, and that's how really phase conjugation was discovered in the microwave and the optical. And you implode a pair of opposing cones. And the reason that phase conjugation happens is because that implosion, we call it pine cones kissing noses, has to happen in what's called a super dielectric. Let me explain in terms of scrying or Nostradamus. So if you want a phase conjugate mirror to make the proven time reversal and self-organization, which was first measured with phase conjugate optics, the two opposing lasers, which are like a caduceus meeting, they have to meet in what's called a super dielectric, example, barium strontium titanate. And there, because the super dielectric is charge distribution permissive, pretty much the definition of heaven, and that allows the pine cones to implode in kissing noses. Now, when Nostradamus learned to put the correct coating under his water scrying cup is when he began to see the future, or when the Olmec used the famous blue stones, or John Dee's famous showstone scrying mirror, the Aztec and the Olmec, how they made ancestor phone calls. These were also phase conjugate mirrors. And the reason is because in the phase conjugate mirror, you have the ability to implode and couple with a longitudinal array. A very practical example is when you teach kids to make the same frequency signature, Schumann cascade, in their brain waves, and not only, of course, do they have bliss, but this is how we teach seeing without the eyes, very famous around the world. We lead in measuring that, flameinmind.com/outer vision. So, but when you teach kids how to implode their brainwaves and then like imagine themselves in beautiful nature, their body flips the switch, they get fractal, and you get this golden ratio cascade alpha to gamma, and suddenly they're seeing without their eyes. Very famous, very teachable, done in many countries. But the thing that's interesting, many, if not most of those same kids, when they learn to do that, they start seeing their dead grandmothers.
Whoa.
And their parents freak out. This is an interesting introduction to the physics of clairvoyance.
Wow.
You know that when, and we get clairvoyance also now in our in PhiRay.com. It's becoming famous for that. The world's most powerful Schumann harmonics cascade, PhiRay.com, in that magnetic coil, which is a cocoon that feels very blissful and grounding. It's the most powerful Schumann cascade on the planet. And we're in phase with the plasma atmosphere. But now they've discovered that those who have any inclination to clairvoyance, when they focus in the center of that magnetic field, they can look through their body clairvoyantly and do clairvoyant medical diagnosis. The physics of clairvoyance is the implosion that phase conjugates and couples you to the array. Last part of that story. So when my friend Andrei Puharich first communicated with Enki Tom Atun, which then became the movie Star Trek with Phyllis Schlemmer, how he started with the phone calls with Enki, famously, he had built a piezo device under the ear bones, which was teaching kids who were deaf to be able to hear. and he was successful. But what he did not know was that was an introduction to the physics of clairaudience.